was that we had all been told by many of our best prognosticators it was going to be close.
Since joining the race, the vice president has raised an eye-boggling $1 billion.
Call me eyes-boggled.
This is where things start to get really interesting, especially coming from someone like Jon Stewart, who's long been seen as a Democrat sympathizer. Before the election, it was clear to anyone paying attention that Trump was on track for a decisive victory. But Democrats, along with their loyal allies at MSNBC, were busy promoting optimistic stories about a Kamala Harris win. They held tightly to their narratives, ignored clear polling trends, and brushed aside the rising wave of public dissatisfaction. Even now, some Democrats remain in denial, refusing to acknowledge Trump's win as a landslide, even though the numbers, momentum, and national mood all pointed to that conclusion. It's a textbook case of cognitive dissonance. And for Jon Stewart, it became impossible to ignore.
But if you remember, the last time that we spoke, it was midnight on election night. And it seemed even at that moment very clear Donald Trump had won the election in a bit of a thumping.
I clearly recall watching polls on MSNBC boldly forecasting a win for Kamala Harris. The network rolled out a steady roster of so-called election specialists and political commentators, all praising her like a synchronized chorus. They cited hand-picked data from Emerson, Morning Consult, and even MSNBC's internal polling, insisting she was on course to narrowly beat Trump. Night after night, they reinforced the idea that a Harris victory was a sure thing. Despite mounting signs that told a different story, these commentators didn't merely guess. They gave viewers firm reassurances that Kamala would just barely come out on top, creating false expectations and ultimately leading their audience to major letdown.
Was that we had all been told by many of our best prognosticators it was going to be close.
It got to the point where even the most doubtful among us started buying into MSNBC's storyline, simply because of the non-stop stream of experts they paraded on air every day. The sheer number was overwhelming. Former campaign advisors, polling experts, Ivy League academics, you name it, they had them. Each one confidently repeated the same message. The Democrats had a hidden advantage, a game-changer that, once revealed, would bring Trump's momentum to a grinding stop. They never really explained what this so-called secret weapon was, but the mystery kept viewers engaged and optimistic. So, what exactly was this secret weapon? Let's find out.
He ran the results in the computer 100,000 times. She won 50,001. He won 40,099, 99, but in this coin flip country, I was confident because the Democrats had a secret weapon.
Exactly. Remember when MSNBC couldn't stop boasting about the Democrats' record-breaking fundraising haul? They aired non-stop segments claiming the party had pulled in enough cash to win elections anywhere, as if money alone guaranteed success. They spotlighted figures from ActBlue and bragged about enormous war chests for Kamala Harris, the DNC, and key Senate campaigns. Anchors breathlessly threw around numbers like $100 million raised in just a few weeks, calling it historic and a total game-changer. The message was unmistakable. With that kind of funding, defeat wasn't even on the table. Spoiler alert, it was. Turns out, no amount of money can sell a message that voters simply aren't interested in. Which raises the obvious question, where did all that money actually go?
Since joining the race, the vice president has raised an eye-boggling $1 billion.
Call me eyes-boggled.
Alright, so I'm not exactly a big fan of Jon Stewart's comedy, but I've got to admit, this part was genuinely funny. Hands up if you were one of the millions constantly hit with those relentless, borderline desperate texts from the Democrats. Chip in $5 to save democracy. Ring a bell? They came at all hours, in the most random situations. Drop a comment and share the weirdest or most awkward time you got one. I'm serious, I once got one during a funeral. No lie. Another time, right in the middle of ordering tacos. It was like they had some bizarre radar for picking the absolute worst moments. But just when we thought the Democratic campaign couldn't possibly get more ridiculous, they hit us with this bombshell.
How did that money went to? How the did they just text me? I'm in the tub. I don't even have my phone. It just came through the water.
50,000 volunteers knocking on 5 million doors just to drag Kamala Harris across the finish line. That's not just commitment, it's borderline madness. I knew they had folks out canvassing, but I didn't realize they were out there trying to outdo the Jehovah's Witnesses. At least the Jehovah's Witnesses show up with a smile and a pamphlet. These people came armed with clipboards, QR codes, and a mission to save democracy. Some neighborhoods got hit 3 times in a single week. It got so out of hand, people were pretending they weren't home just to dodge yet another awkward doorstep pitch about Kamala's vision for the country. It didn't feel like a campaign, it felt like a full-scale invasion of personal space. And somehow, even with all that effort, it still wasn't enough to pull off a win. Let's see what Jon Stewart has to say about it.
Harris' campaign has a massive ground game, 50,000 volunteers.
With volunteers knocking on 5 million doors in Pennsylvania alone.
This is the first time some Democrats have told me they've ever heard of people knocking on the same doors.
To his credit, Jon Stewart calls it like he sees it, and in this case, he didn't pull any punches. Blowing millions of dollars just to invade people's privacy wasn't exactly the Democrats' brightest idea. In fact, as Stewart points out, this kind of overly aggressive outreach has consistently been a losing tactic. Here's the kicker: Democrats have known this for years. It's not some shocking revelation. Focus groups, internal reports, post-election breakdowns, they've all come to the same conclusion. Constant door-knocking, unsolicited texts, and endless email blasts don't energize voters, they exhaust them. But rather than adapt, the party chose to crank up the noise. Stewart's message is clear: when you treat voters like marketing targets instead of real people, don't act surprised when they stop listening. And believe it or not, that wasn't the only reason they tuned out. Stewart had even more to reveal.
Now, everyone from vacuum salesmen to Jehovah's Witnesses know that's a losing strategy. In fact, they've known that for decades. Let's just spend $250 million on.
MSNBC wouldn't let up with the narrative that Donald Trump was a fascist bent on destroying democracy as we know it. Night after night, they hammered home the idea that the only way to preserve democracy was to vote against him. Urgently, decisively, and en masse. The hashtag democracy now was plastered across social media, campaign ads, and segment after segment on primetime TV. And leave it to MSNBC to do what they do best: paint an apocalyptic picture of doom and gloom to fuel public fear and generate sympathy for the Democrats. They framed the election as a final showdown, a battle for the very soul of the nation. But over time, it started to feel less like journalism and more like political theater, and many Americans saw right through it.
Democracy and freedom are on the ballot.
Our democracy is on the line.
We have to protect democracy.
We have to work even harder to make sure that we defend our democracy.
We don't get to choose when we're asked to defend democracy. We just have to do it.
In a hilarious twist of fate, the Democrats ended up protecting democracy, just so the Republicans could reap the benefits. Think about that for a second. They spent millions, launched endless campaigns, and flooded the airwaves with panic-driven messages, all in the name of saving democracy. And now, Trump is the one enjoying the rewards of all that effort. It's almost poetic. The very system they claimed he was trying to destroy is now working in his favor, thanks in part to their own exaggerated theatrics. Honestly, at this point, you could argue that MSNBC is doing more to boost Trump than his own campaign. With every overblown segment and doomsday prediction, they're only making him appear stronger and validating Jon Stewart's point.
Glad to say Democrats did protect democracy. Just for the other side. Because when all is said and done, we had a free and fair election.
MSNBC kept assuring us that this was the election where the Democrats were the most prepared, the most organized, and more fired up than ever. But in all their cheerleading, they overlooked one crucial detail: reminding the party to actually cover all their bases, both literally and figuratively. While MSNBC was busy praising the party and hyping up record-breaking enthusiasm, they neglected their core responsibility as journalists: keeping expectations in check and holding the Democrats accountable. Instead of offering balanced analysis or asking tough questions, they became the hype squad, amplifying the narrative without questioning the gaps. They didn't scrutinize campaign strategies, ignored warning signs about voter turnout, and turned a blind eye to internal party unrest. In doing so, they left the Democrats to blindly charge into a storm they never saw coming.
The Democrats had been prepared for almost every scenario but one.
The Harris campaign has built probably the most sophisticated, robust, impressive voter protection program in the history of presidential politics.
The Democrats did everything right, at least on paper. They raised record amounts of money, mobilized volunteers, dominated media coverage, and built a massive ground operation. But they missed the most critical piece of the puzzle: delivering a message that truly resonated with everyday Americans. Instead, they doubled down on divisive rhetoric, identity politics, and virtue-signaling buzzwords that ended up alienating more voters than they inspired. Their disconnect from real issues, like the economy, public safety, and border security, ultimately sealed their fate. Had they spent even half the energy they poured into their divisive agenda on crafting a unifying, clear, and relatable message, we might be seeing a very different outcome right now. But instead of listening, they lectured, and voters responded the only way they knew how, at the ballot box.
Lawyers, we got the protecting the... What do we got? Jimmy, did you bring the voters? Oh, I thought you were bringing the voters. I brought the hate has no home here posters. Nobody brought the voters? Where are the voters?
In the end, it was Trump who gave the Democrats a masterclass in how to win an election, by handing them a defeat so decisive it rattled their entire strategy to the core. But let's be honest, the one network that truly let them down wasn't Fox News or any right-wing outlet. It was MSNBC. Supposedly their biggest ally, MSNBC built an echo chamber so thick with misplaced confidence and partisan spin that it blinded the Democratic base to the reality on the ground. Instead of offering honest analysis, they fed the public a constant stream of wishful thinking, inflated polling, and overhyped narratives. In doing so, they didn't just mislead their viewers, they misled an entire political movement straight into a losing strategy. And now, they're scrambling to rewrite the story.
Turns out the election was stolen by more people voting for Donald Trump. It's quite a caper. Ocean's 74 million.
Now the Democrats are doing what they do best after a major loss, pointing fingers. The blame game is in full force. Some are insisting that Joe Biden should have stepped down much earlier, giving the party a chance to regroup and present a fresh face. Others argue that Kamala Harris should never have been the nominee in the first place, citing her consistently low approval ratings and her inability to connect with swing state voters. Behind closed doors, there's chaos, strategists, donors, and party officials all scrambling to rewrite the narrative and save face. Instead of learning from their failures, they're busy tearing each other apart. It's a post-election meltdown that was entirely predictable and one that Jon Stewart, ironically, predicted with brutal accuracy. MSNBC has proven itself to be a group of complete hypocrites, constantly egging the Democrats on, fueling their delusions, and pumping up Kamala Harris like she was a political juggernaut. Now, whether they truly believed she was going to win or were just playing along for ratings is anyone's guess. But I wouldn't be shocked if they knew the outcome was inevitable and still chose to play along. Why? Because creating hope sells. It keeps viewers glued to their screens and the ad revenue rolling in. Instead of offering critical insight or thoughtful analysis, they played the role of enablers, not journalists. And when reality hit, they simply pivoted the narrative as if they hadn't just spent months pretending everything was fine.
Now, as many on the left fear the future, as they should, many others rue the past.
Joe Biden should have dropped out earlier.
There should have been an open primary.
And that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed our honest take, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more no-nonsense commentary. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.